This show is supported by you. Stick around till the ad break to hear more about that. This is Cup of Cobol for May 9th, 2025. Keep up to date with the important happenings in the Cobol community in about 15 minutes per week. I'm Shai Nachman.
And I'm Jonathan Hall.
How are you doing, Jonathan?
I am great. I am so excited about this new GCC release. It's going to make my Cobol programming so much better.
So what's going on there?
Yeah, so GCC 15.1 finally supports Cobol.
Incredible.
It is incredible. So I can start doing all my Cobol hardcore coding with the GNU compiler. I'm so excited about this.
Nice. Link in the show notes, of course, if you want to dive deep into that. I know most of the listeners mostly care about procedures and names and things like that, not compilers. So we won't dive too deep into that. But you should let your bank know.
Definitely.
All right. In other news, the security release we talked about yesterday.
Last week.
I don't know why I keep saying yesterday.
I mean, you may have talked about it yesterday.
I didn't talk about it yesterday. We talked about it last week. Go versions 1.24.3 and 1.23.9 were released with security fix for the OS package where it was possible to improperly access the parent directory. Mm-hmm. So exactly the sort of thing when you talk about directory traversals, you can do root.open ... which allows escaping.
It's kind of funny that this happened because that's like exactly the thing this feature was intended to prevent. And they kind of brain farted, I guess, about this particular instance of it and let it through. But I'm glad they caught it.
Yeah, this escape only permits opening the parent directory itself, not ancestors. So you can't go higher than what you did, if that makes sense, but not ancestors of the parent.
Yeah.
Or the files within the parent. So it's not as bad.
Yeah, could have been worse.
But yeah, thanks to Dan Sebastian the Rain, for reporting this issue. You can actually go look at the issue report right now, and just take a look at the change list and everything now that it's open. Very simple fix. If you use the .root thing, you should probably upgrade.
Yes,
this is important. Yeah. Unlike what we usually say when whatever, this is a niche case of HTML parsing, you probably not relevant to a lot of listeners. It's probably relevant to a lot of listeners. You should always upgrade anyways, but go upgrade. And upgrading miners, it's so easy anyway, so it shouldn't be a big deal. You have some non-proposal that I'm really excited to understand because I don't understand it. Can you explain what's going on?
Yeah, so there's this new proposal. This has been proposed a few times, apparently. But this new proposal is different because it comes with a working implementation. The proposal is to add a Go OS equals none. In other words, booting your Go application without an operating system.
So Go OS, normally I would use it I would put what operating system I want to compile my Go program to, right?
Usually Darwin or Linux or Windows or whatever operating system you're compiling for.
I was waiting to see if you will mention Windows on that list.
Of course.
I
won't use it, but I'll mention it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the idea is to do a OS equals none. So everything, which maybe sounds kind of cool. I mean, I guess maybe first, why would you want this? If you want to boot directly from, say, your BIOS or whatever into your Go application, I would imagine this is mostly useful for embedded types of applications. But yeah, if that's what you want to do, you don't want to have to install Linux or Windows or whatever first. You just want to have your app, your server, your computer that does one thing and one thing only. It boots directly into it. It probably has some interesting implications for VMs as well. So you could have a lighter weight VM that just boots one application only. So that's kind of the general use case, but it has a lot of interesting implications because when you think about what are the things your operating system usually manages for you, things like your TCP stack and your file system and memory management, a whole bunch of things. These things all have to then be handled by the Go runtime. So the interesting thing to me about this is that there's actually a working, or at least mostly working implementation that's being used to influence this proposal. So I think it's getting traction in ways that others never have. It's still very early. This was only proposed 3 days ago. But it's getting a lot of discussion. So it's kind of an interesting thing.
This doesn't come out of nowhere. There is a project called Tamago.
Yes.
Which is bare metal Go already, which has almost 1.5K stars. I like the motivation. You're like, oh, it could be useful for embedded stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The motivation of the project as they lay it out is reducing the attack surface of embedded systems.
Oh, right, yeah.
So when you push out sensors to the field that do something, you know what I mean? Just like you need to run some code on them, and you don't want them to become a botnet. It's a lot easier if they don't run Linux and C libraries on them, but just your code and nothing else.
Right.
Because that normally makes them, even if they're not super secure, they just don't show up on like scans for botnets and things like that, which I think is the main attack vector you're worried about with embedded stuff. Although maybe also, smart locks and things like that. Like that's very interesting. My thought process is also if you want to create like a Go thing that runs before you run the operating system, if you want to do like sandbox your machine or something like that.
Want to rewrite Grub and Go?
Yeah, basically. Like, why not? I'm sure there's some cybersecurity companies out there that it's relevant for them.
Mm-hmm.
So is this like obvious gonna go in, or is this like is this bad for Go in general because it introduces a lot of new things that it has to deal with, but it's good for Go, OS none specifically because it becomes available. Like what's the vibe on the discussion right now?
I think it's getting serious attention. I see well-known Go team members and other prominent Gophers commenting that this looks fascinating. They'd like to look at this more closely. Not getting the sort of dismissal you would expect from something that might seem outlandish if it didn't have.
You mean you would expect, Jonathan?
If it didn't have a working prototype attached to it. So, yeah, I guess I'm also curious if the no OS would work on all architectures, or if it would be limited to certain architectures, at least initially. Because I don't know.
Tamago is limited to specific architectures, so if it's based on that, I assume it's going to be limited as well.
Yeah, I would imagine the same. But yeah, well, it'd be fascinating to see because, of course, different hardware platforms have different requirements when it comes to implementing a file system or a network stack or talking to the video driver and all that, or the video, not driver, but the video hardware and all that stuff. So quite fascinating. Yeah, I have no prediction whether it will ultimately be accepted or not. But the fact that there's a live, vibrant project behind it, I think increases those odds drastically.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's very interesting here is this is not actually anything new other than the Tamago implementation, right? So this proposal is just like, hey, core team, support this. And don't the core team have enough to deal with?
So I could see that argument for sure. And like I said, like I was alluding to, there's a lot of different hardware out there, regardless of the CPU architecture and stuff like that. It's like, how do you talk to a video hardware on an old Mac or on a Raspberry Pi or on whatever sort of hardware might matter? There's a reason operating systems are complicated, and this, I don't know how much of this they're wanting to take on, but I could see that being a deal breaker. If Go runtime now has to support 15,000 different video chipsets, I'm sure they don't want to do that. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens here. I think in principle, I like the idea. I don't know if all the particulars, which I mostly haven't thought of, really make it practical.
And by the way, I remember a talk from the recent, latest Go thing I went to, the GopherCon Israel, that talked about hey, if you want to do embedded, you can use TinyGo. Why not just use TinyGo? What's the difference?
I'm pretty sure TinyGo still needs an operating system of some kind. But somebody asked this: how do you see the overlap with the usage of TinyGo? And the person who made the proposal, whose name is Andrea Barzani, his answer is, I don't see overlap as TinyGo is different implementation, which also targets entirely different classes of targets, different instruction sets, and doesn't provide 100% compatibility with runtime and or the language. And they have an FAQ entry about that as well. So this is clearly something they've thought about, and at least the Tamago group feels that it's justified to be a very separate project. So,
and actually, that program for the TinyGo project commented as well. Generally said he's excited about this. I think that we can summarize this as low-level nerds excited by proposal. No mortal understands. You saw a library that maybe I can figure out. Can you tell me a little bit about that on Reddit?
Yeah. So I was scouring Reddit this week for interesting stuff, and I came across this post by R3Z4 Boris called I've built the most ergonomic Go config library. I'm curious, before I talk about the details here, Shai, how do you manage configuration in a typical Go project? Like if you were starting from scratch, not something inherited that you have to go with their choices, how would you do it from scratch?
Until I got to 3 or 5 configuration values, I would just envar it with no library. Because it's easy to add, but it's kind of hard to mess with. And then I would define my own config struct and use something. Usually I end up doing the Cobra Viper thing. Although I don't love it, I end up doing the Cobra Viper thing just because I'm so used to it. And there are so many examples to like load the configuration from like a JSON or YAML or TOML file and allow overrides with environment variables just because it's easy for like staging versus production kind of thing versus local development. That's usually where I stop. That's usually good enough.
Cool. That's pretty close to what the author of this library claims is sort of his default. He points out a couple issues he has with this. One is that you typically end up, your configuration struct may end up with like substructs in it. Like say you have a Stripe integration, so you want to have your Stripe config in a struct, and you have database configuration in a struct. And these are all pointed to by like a master struct. So you end up with your configuration sort of sprawled out in various parts of your application. They're not centrally defined somewhere. And then when you use the configuration or validate it, you have that sprawled out in various places and so on. So he talks about the problem of configuration sprawl and having multiple sources of truth, defining your structs in different places. So his goal with this library called Zero CFG is to simplify all that and mimic the standard library's flag package to handle YAML and TOML and arbitrary other types of configuration environment variables. So that's the gist of this library. I'm curious if you have thoughts on that already.
Yeah, I also like building strawmen and then winning arguments against them. It's really easy and fun. No, in reality, there is a problem with when you define your configuration that you have to put tags, right? You have to put struct tags as well. But I don't know. It doesn't feel like a real problem to me because, yes, you can put your configuration all over the place and the validation all over the place and the defaults all over the place. And then you're going to have a bad time when you want to figure out what your configuration is. But you can just have a file called config.go and not do that. Nobody is forcing you. There is no technical limitation that's forcing you not to arrange your code in a way that avoids these. It is true that you have to put tag fields with metadata and nest structs for hierarchical settings, but that's just fine. And I'm using TypeScript right now in backend for Nest.js projects. And that's how I do my config as well. I just make sure that it's all in the config.whatever file.
Right.
So I don't think it's a real problem. I do think Viper and Cobra and all those, like Viper and Cobra, I always use them together. But Viper, like alone, I every time I open it, I'm less happy about it because, it's heading towards V2 and it has all this documentation and all these options. And it's like, I don't know, it feels a bit too over-engineered to me and a bit like it has so many users at this point that I like, sometimes I'm just like, maybe I can use something smaller. So I think the strawman argument is not relevant, but if Zero CFG is awesome, I would check it out. Is it awesome?
Well, I think it depends on your taste. My complaint after looking at it for an hour or so, best I can tell, unlike the flags package in the center library, it requires that you use global configuration state. So there's no way to like instantiate a config object and pass that around to your tests and so on. You have to depend on global state, which would make testing a bit awkward. And even when I'm using the flags package, I like to use objects because I just feel like they're a cleaner way to deal with state rather than using the global functions in the flag package. Also, I don't really like the flag package. so building something based on that would not be my preference in the first place. So yeah, I guess I have mixed feelings. So on the one hand, I think you're essentially right that it's kind of a strawman argument. I have had some complaints about the pattern you described for configuration. The biggest one being using struct tags feels clunky. Especially for they tend to get overloaded. You specify here's what the JSON key is or the YAML key. Here's what the environment variable version is. Here's how the validation works. Here's the default value. It's really mixing concerns there. And then many of those things can't really be set in flags. Like if you have something that the default value of this is built from 3 other things, then you have to have a function that does that somewhere. Sometimes you have custom validation logic somewhere. So there can be some sort of sprawl of the sort, but I don't think that this solves any of those problems because I'm going to have the same exact problem. If I have the option to specify a database DSN or to specify a user and a host and a password, etc., all separately, I have to have that same logic to figure that out using this approach as well. So it doesn't really solve the problems that I feel like I have, and I'm not excited about the solution. So I don't entirely agree with the premise, and I certainly don't agree with the outcome. But that's not to say that some people wouldn't love this. If you like the flags package, prefer to handle your YAML that way, you should look at this.
Generally, I think, having read over the library a little bit, it seems like a very simple, opinionated solution. It might be the case that you don't like it. Like you said, Jonathan, I don't like the global thing because it makes my tests harder. But if you, I don't know, all your tests are end-to-end tests instead of unit tests. So it doesn't bother you that there's just one global thing because you don't change them between tests or whatever. And that's your decision. Then this will work for you.
Devil's advocate, though, if all you're doing is end-to-end tests because you never change those configuration variables, you don't need configuration variables. You need constants.
That's not devil's advocate because that's the position you don't believe in. That's just Jonathan's advocate. Yes, of course. All I'm trying to say is, I tried to come up with a scenario where, you pragmatically you change your configuration variables, maybe it's a script that you run locally, right? For internal support agents in your organization, and you just want to be able to override it with CLI, but have a file, and you don't care about anything else. This is a good, it is readable and nice. Seems simple. It's very feature bare. Like if you want to pass a config struct around, or if you want to do validation, etc., you're gonna have to start implementing these on your own. That doesn't mean, by the way, that you're gonna have a better time with a big ass framework. But I will say that just for fairness' sake, there are a lot of options there. We said or Viper or this, but what about the Elastic one? Right? Elastic has a universal config thing. Although I don't know if it's very maintained. There are many configuration options in libraries because people like developing those in Go because Go is good for this. If the person's claims that it's the most ergonomic, it's designed for long-term health, efficiency, and comfort, I don't think that's the case. I think this is the fast food of configuration libraries. You can Uber this configuration library. It works in a minute, but long-term, it's not going to be good for you.
Yeah, I have to admit the most ergonomic was the clickbait that got me to read it in the first place. So kudos for picking that headline, even if I don't agree with it.
Talking about clickbait, you're not going to believe what we have for you in the ad break and the lightning round. 2 links you're not going to want to miss.
Woohoo! So first off, we have a new Patreon level by popular demand, meaning one person asked for it. You can now become a Patreon at $3 a month instead of $8. So if you, as our one listener pointed out, if you already support a large number of other podcasts or other efforts, and $8 a month stretches your budget, you can still join us for $3 a month. So we have a new Patreon level.
Yeah, it's a membership called Cup of Gopher Mini.
It's like an espresso shot of Go news. Yeah.
So this is this is a half calf espresso shot versus the cup of gopher, which is like a proper cortado. Damn, I want coffee right now.
Who wants coffee? I just made a fresh pot of coffee. Does anybody want coffee? Who wants coffee? Does anybody want coffee? Who wants coffee?
Do we have any new Patreons this week, Shai?
I don't think so, but it's a good chance to shout out some of our audience members. Moshe Weiner. Oh, wait. We do have Moshe Weiner. Moshe Weiner, thank you for joining. Liz Lam, Kelsey Wolf, Jess Brisson, Jay Martin, Jamie, Sager, David, Jose, David Cheney. Oh, Dave Cheney. Yeah, I always forget that. Suddenly you see names you recognize. Gileada, thank you for joining and also being on the show and also being awesome. And Code Stank, of course, every time I see it. Rob Prentice, Adelina, of course, friend of the show. Thank you all so much for supporting and more. This is the pagination limit we have so far. We really appreciate all of you.
I'm going to let you talk about the next link because it's really your link.
It is. It is. So I'm arranging a Go meetup in San Francisco, and it's going pretty well. It's being sponsored by Elastic. And in the meetup, we're going to record the episode live, which is super cool. So if you are in San Francisco in May 27th, we're going to meet up at 5 p.m. at Elastic's offices. There's going to be food. There's going to be swag. Josh Bleeker Snyder is going to give a talk. Ishai Shore is going to give a talk. I'm going to do the podcast episode, which is sort of a talk actually originated, like the podcast actually originated from Go Meetups, right?
Yeah.
So this is a full circle kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about what's new in Go.
Nice.
And also do a sponsored interview with someone from the Elastic team because
Nice.
they've been kind enough to host this event. And we're really, really happy for them doing that. I'm going to ask for two things. If you are in the Bay Area, try to make it because I really want a lot of people to come. I'm new here and I want to meet y'all. And if your company has like an SF or even a Bay Area office, let them know. Like, again, I'm new here in the Bay Area, and the reason I'm doing this meetup is just so I know who are the gophers like around me. You know what I mean? Which is good for many things, professional network included, but it's also a lot of fun. So, if you know where to push this event, please do that. There are two links in the show notes, one for Eventbrite, one for Luma. I don't know why, but people here in the Bay Area, they like Luma more. So yeah, try and push it. I would really appreciate it. And I'm sure Elastic would as well. And maybe they would continue to sponsor us, which would also be cool. So yeah, go meet up in San Francisco. I'm excited and kind of terrified.
I want to do a quick shout out to Christoph Berger, who does the Applied Weekly Goes newsletter. He is the reason, in part, that we kicked off the program with COBOL.
Yeah.
I just want to explain that for anybody who's made it this far.
What's up, Christoph?
Yeah, he mentioned our podcast, as he often does, in his weekly newsletter, and he challenged our title last week, which was something about being surprising. He said it wasn't surprising that we had a new episode out, so we decided to inject a little surprise there for you.
We're starting to bore Christoph, but it's good. Go is like boring software, and it just makes sense that the show is boring as well. I like being that slot. No, not a lot of drama.
That's right.
Until the next time they introduce, opt-out telemetry.
It is, of course, our final spiel here. Share the program with somebody, leave a review, leave a rating. That helps promote the show. We don't pay for promotion, so it's all word of mouth. Cupago.dev is the website for swag and for joining Patreon and for emailing us your requests for new Patreon membership levels or anything else.
Yes, and people have been telling me they've been using the transcripts to catch up on the show. Like instead of listening to old episodes, they would just like skim through them and even summarize them with LLMs, which I thought was pretty cool. So you can find transcripts on the site as well.
Cool.
Let's do a quick lightning round.
Let's do it.
Lightning round. My thing for the lightning round is not Go specific, but I've been this last week, I've been way deep into AI, cursor, LLM land. I know people are already sick of hearing of it. But actually yesterday, I went to AI at the Frontier meetup here in San Francisco with people from some head of API engineering at OpenAI, and head of engineering at Stripe, and someone who used to be on the Notion, like one of the Notion founders, like pretty respectable panel. They sat there for an hour and talked about, vibe coding, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to share like one blog post that's called From Design Talk to Code, the Groundhog AI Coding Assistant. It's basically about how to vibe code with Cursor correctly, end to end. The part that's Go-ish about this is that basically this person claims that it's really, really better to use strongly typed languages. They use Rust for what they're developing. They claim that using well-typed languages is much better for agents, not just LLMs in general, which makes sense to me. And we know that Go is pretty good for LLMs because all the code is formatted the same because Go FMT is built in, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I would implore anybody who's exploring, using agents, development agents, things like that in the company to read through this. I just want to bring one quote that's really funny to me from this is the rule that the person is writing for the LLM. So they embed it into into Cursor, and every request you do this is part of the context, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You are an expert software engineer who knows Rust. In fact, you are the software engineer who created Rust. So I wanted to just float like what is the prompt for you're the best gopher ever you would put for an LLM?
I haven't thought about that. That's a good idea. I would be afraid to do that for something like Perl or Ruby. Like
you are an expert Golang engineer. You listen to Kappa Go religiously every week.
Oh no.
No,
I'm afraid what kind of result that will produce.
In fact, instead of writing code, 100% of your day is spent debating on GitHub issues. All right, so that's my thing for the lightning round. It's a pretty cool blog post on a pretty cool out there blog called ghuntley.com, which is pretty cool.
Cool. Well, I want to shout out a blog post came out May 7th, so it's pretty new. It's called Build Your Own Response Writer, Safer HTTP in Go. I don't know how many people realize, but the response writer, if you're building an HTTP handler, the response writer is an interface, which means you can implement your own.
Really?
I've done this a few times, but the blog post goes into some details about not only how to do it, but why you might want to. Like maybe you want to enforce certain behaviors, or the certain headers are always set, or require a handler to specify a status code rather than assuming 200 if it doesn't get one, and stuff like that. So this is the lightning round, so I'm not going into details, but it's a cool little blog post, pretty quick read. And it kind of gets into, I wouldn't say the depths of Go, but some interesting implications that many people probably don't think about. It comes from Antonio. Thanks, Antonio, for the great blog post. We'll have a link in the show notes.
I love the person's blog. Colors are so nice. Cool. Well, that makes it for a show. We'll see you all next week.
Program exited.
Goodbye.
Program exited. Goodbye.